Midway through my presentation, my manager slammed her hand on the table and said, "This is a disaster. Sit down before you embarrass us more." People gasped. Some even whispered. My face burned, but I kept packing my notes slowly. She thought she'd crushed me. She had no idea the client had just texted, "Step outside. Your manager's about to get a surprise." The sound of Aurora's hand hitting the table was so loud that people in the hallway probably heard it. The conference room went dead, silent. "This is a disaster." I was standing at the front of the room mid-sentence explaining demographic clustering patterns to the Meridian Group client and half of Silverton Analytics leadership team. My PowerPoint slide glowed on the screen behind me. 11 weeks of research distilled into charts and algorithms and insights that could secure a $15 million contract. Then Aurora Winters stood up. "Sit down before you embarrass us more." My manager's voice cut through the room with surgical precision. 14 bar. 4 people stopped breathing. The VP of Operations looked away like he couldn't bear to watch. Marcus Brennan from accounting leaned toward his neighbor and whispered something that made them both grimace. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. People are actually making decisions based on this. Aurora continued, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Hannah, I don't know where you learned market segmentation, but this methodology is fundamentally broken." My face went hot. My hands started trembling against my will. 2 years at this company, countless overnight sessions where I'd fallen asleep at my desk with my face pressed against spreadsheets, a 94% client retention rate that everyone in this room knew about. 3 saved accounts that the entire department had written off as unsalvageable. None of it mattered in this moment. Aurora was circling toward the projection screen, now gesturing at my charts like they were exhibits in a trial where I was the defendant. The demographic clustering ignores generational spending disparities. The predictive models use outdated regression analysis. She paused for effect, looking around the room to make sure everyone was absorbing her words. I apologized that this reached presentation stage. My phone buzzed in my pocket once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. The room was waiting for me to break down, to apologize, to confirm Aurora's narrative that I wasn't ready for this level of work. Instead, I closed my laptop with deliberate calm and stacked my notes into a neat pile. My movements felt mechanical, disconnected from the chaos screaming inside my head. "I'll step out and give you space to present," I said quietly. Aurora's expression flickered for just a second. Surprise first, then satisfaction spreading across her face like oil on water. She thought she'd won. She thought this was over. I walked toward the door on legs that didn't feel entirely connected to my body, and only then did I check my phone. 3 messages from an unknown number. The first one made my heart stop. "This is Dr. Sienna Blackwell. Step outside." The second message was even more confusing. "Your manager's about to get a surprise. She won't forget the client." Aurora had just humiliated me in front of the one person who could destroy her, and she had no idea. Standing in the hallway outside that conference room, I realized how completely I'd misunderstood everything. The hallway felt colder than the conference room. Or maybe that was just my body finally processing what had happened. My face still burned from the humiliation, but my hands had stopped shaking. The phone felt heavy in my palm, those words glowing on the screen like some kind of lifeline I didn't know existed. What did that mean? Who was Dr. Sienna Blackwell beyond the title and the company she represented? Why was she texting me instead of sitting in that room? Through the heavy wood of the conference room door, I could hear Aurora's voice, muffled but confident. She was mid-explanation, probably presenting ideas she'd never developed, making herself look like the strategic genius who'd saved a flawed analysis. 11 weeks. That's how long I'd spent on the Meridian analysis, not 11 weeks of casual effort. 11 weeks of 16-hour days and weekend sessions. I'd interviewed 200 people across 8 markets, built predictive algorithms from scratch that accounted for 17 different variables, cross-referenced spending patterns with psychographic profiles in ways I'd never attempted before. The clustering analysis alone had taken 3 weeks to perfect. This was the best work I'd ever done, and Aurora had requested my complete files yesterday afternoon, the first time she'd shown any interest in the Meridian account since assigning it to me 3 months ago. She'd said she wanted context for the client meeting, said she trusted me, but wanted to be prepared to answer strategic questions. I'd sent everything, every file, every iteration, every piece of analysis I'd built. Now I understood why she'd needed my work so she could figure out how to destroy it. My phone buzzed again. A fourth message. 2 minutes. Rooftop terrace. The rooftop terrace was empty except for a woman standing near the railing, Dr. Sienna Blackwell. She turned when she heard the door open. Silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a severe bun. Designer glasses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. A charcoal suit that fit like it had been custom-made, which it probably had been. She carried herself with the kind of absolute confidence that comes from being unquestionably right about complicated things for several decades. "Hannah Pierce," she said, not a question, a statement. "Walk with me." We walked toward the far end of the terrace, away from the doors and any possibility of being overheard. Wind whipped across the open space. The city hummed with traffic and construction far below. When we reached the railing, she stopped and turned to face me directly. "Your manager doesn't understand your work because she's never done work at that level." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "The clustering analysis you presented uses modified Blackwell segmentation." She paused, watching my reaction. "I know because I invented Blackwell segmentation." The world tilted slightly. "The adaptations you made integrating generational spending with geographic volatility represent a significant methodological advancement. Your confidence interval calculations use a modified basis approach that reduces margin of error by approximately 30% compared to standard frameworks." Another pause. "Your manager just spent 10 minutes in that conference room explaining why methodology I pioneered is fundamentally broken. She did this with absolute certainty in front of me because she has no idea who I am beyond my title." My brain was struggling to catch up. Dr. Sienna Blackwell. The Sienna Blackwell. I'd read her research papers in graduate school. I'd used her frameworks in every major analysis I'd done. I'd cited her work in academic papers and professional presentations. She'd invented the methodology I'd adapted for my Meridian analysis, and Aurora had just publicly declared it broken. "I need you to understand what just happened in that room." Sienna's voice remained clinical precise. "Your manager didn't critique your work because it was flawed. She critiqued it because she doesn't understand it. And she doesn't understand it because she's never produced work of that caliber herself." The full picture was starting to come into focus. "She requested your files yesterday," Sienna continued, "not to review them, but to find something she could use against you. She accessed your preliminary drafts, the versions you created 3 weeks ago and then refined, and she's presenting those early versions as the correct approach." "How do you know that?" "Someone in your IT department forwarded me your complete file history last night. Creation dates, revision logs, metadata showing every iteration and improvement you made." Her expression hardened. "I've spent the past 12 hours reviewing your actual work, not the degraded version your manager is currently presenting. Someone had sent my files to the client without my knowledge. Without authorization. Who? Someone who's watched Aurora Winters destroy careers before. Someone who decided it was time to stop her. Aurora became your manager 8 months ago," Sienna said. "Since then, how many of your projects has she claimed credit for?" The answer came immediately, painfully. "All of them." "She's done this BR before. Different company, same pattern." There was an analyst at Redstone Consulting named David Park, brilliant risk assessment specialist. Aurora was his supervisor. She took credit for a model he'd spent 2 years developing. When he complained, the company buried it and pushed him out. My stomach turned cold. I suspected she might try the same thing here. That's why I requested this meeting. That's why I asked specifically to see the analyst who'd produced the preliminary Meridian research. I wanted to evaluate the person behind the work. In the first 10 minutes of that meeting, your manager confirmed everything I suspected. She doesn't understand your methodology. She can't explain your algorithms. She's presenting work she didn't create and can't comprehend." Sienna checked her watch. "I'm going back into that conference room in approximately 4 minutes. I'm going to ask your manager some very specific technical questions about the methodology she just criticized." My stomach dropped through the floor. She won't be able to answer them. Exactly. And when that becomes obvious to everyone in that room, the narrative shifts. Suddenly, it's not about your competence, it's about hers. She turned toward the terrace doors. "I need you to do something for me, Hannah. Go back to your desk, pull up every major project you've worked on since Aurora became your supervisor. File creation dates, revision histories, everything your system tracks. Send it to this email." She handed me a business card with just an email address and her name. "Don't go back to that conference room. What's about to happen in there? You don't need to watch it." I took the stairs instead of the elevator. 6 flights down, my legs shaking with each step. The office floor was nearly empty. My cubicle sat in the far corner. I sank into my chair and stared at my monitor for a long moment before waking it up. I started with the Hartley manufacturing analysis from March. 6 weeks of work developing a supply chain optimization model. I'd interviewed logistics managers across 4 states, built databases tracking shipping routes, inventory levels, seasonal fluctuations. The algorithm I'd created could forecast potential bottlenecks with 83% accuracy. I pulled up the file properties. Creation date March 3rd, last modified by me April 12th. The final report that went to the board was dated April 15th, 3 days after I'd finished with Aurora's name listed as primary author and mine buried in the Burr acknowledgments as analytical support. The Riverside Retail Project from July. 5 weeks developing a geographic expansion algorithm that identified underserved markets. 87% accuracy in market gap identification. Aurora's quarterly review from August claimed she'd pioneered a novel approach to market gap analysis. The Davidson Hotel Group assessment from October. My customer sentiment analysis using natural language processing. I'd written custom code to evaluate thousands of online reviews. Aurora had won ANBR Internal Innovation Award in November for revolutionary qualitative research methodologies. She'd accepted that award at the company holiday party, while I'd applauded along with everyone else. The pattern was undeniable when you looked at it all together. My phone rang. Jenna Mitchell's extension conference room B, 5 minutes. "Don't tell anyone." Jenna was already there when I arrived. Her laptop open, files clear as throat scattered across the table. She was maybe 30 with short dark hair and intense focus. Close Burr the door. "After you left that presentation, I did something I probably shouldn't have. Actually, I did it last night." "What did you do?" "When Aurora requested your complete Meridian files yesterday, I created a duplicate set and forwarded everything to Dr. Blackwell. The original versions with all metadata intact. Creation dates, revision history, your authorship stamps embedded in the code. You sent my files to the client without asking me. I sent the truth to someone who would recognize it. Hannah, Aurora's been doing this for 8 months. You're the 4th analyst I've watched her destroy." 4th, the word hung in the air. David Park was the first, then Maria Santos, then Kyle Brennan, Marcus's cousin. Actually, she turned her laptop toward me. The spreadsheet showed file access patterns, timestamps of when Aurora had requested preliminary work from different analysts, then when she'd presented final versions as her own. March 3rd, Hannah Pierce creates Hartley manufacturing analysis. April 14th, Aurora Winters accesses files. April 15th, Aurora Winters presents to board the pattern repeated across multiple projects, multiple analysts. I see everything. Every file access, every modification, every piece of metadata our systems track. I've been watching Aurora systematically steal work from talented people for 8 months. Why didn't you say something? I tried with David Park. I went to HR with access logs. You know what they told me? That Aurora was his supervisor. That supervisory relationships include collaborative work. David filed a formal complaint. Aurora had relationships with 3 board members. They buried it and gave her a promotion to leave quietly. David got nothing. Last I heard, he's managing a bookstore in Portland. Why did Silverton hire her if this was known? Because nobody knew except the people she'd destroyed, and we'd all signed confidentiality agreements. 3 days later, I received an email. Emergency board meeting Friday, 9 a.m. Your attendance is required. I arrived to find the conference room packed. The entire board of directors sat along one side. Aurora sat opposite with a man I didn't recognize. Her attorney, Maria Santos, and Kyle Brennan sat along the back wall. Jenna was there with her laptop. Dr. Sienna Blackwell occupied a seat near the board. Every chair was filled except one directly across from Aurora. For me, board chair Carolyn Winters called the meeting to order. We're here to address serious allegations regarding project authorship and client billing practices. Patricia Monroe, our general counsel, stood and distributed bound reports. Over the past 5 days, I've conducted interviews with 12 analysts who worked under Ms. Winters' supervision. I've reviewed file access logs, billing records, and metadata from 43 projects. She paused. We've identified 17 projects where significant discrepancies exist between actual work performed and client billing submitted. In total, clients were overbilled approximately $215,000 for work attributed to Ms. Winters. That file metadata proves she did not perform. The number hung in the air like smoke. Aurora's attorney immediately raised his hand. Metadata can be manipulated. File access logs can be misinterpreted. The metadata comes from 3 separate backup systems, Patricia replied, including off-site servers maintained by our IT security contractor. Carolyn Winters looked at Aurora. You'll have an opportunity to respond, but first we're going to hear from several parties, Dr. Blackwell. Would you like to begin? Sienna stood. With calm authority. May I ask Miss Winters some questions about the work she claims to have supervised? What followed was surgical precision. Sienna asked Aurora to explain the clustering algorithm in my meridian analysis. Not just the high-level approach, but the specific mathematical frameworks. Aurora's answer started confident but became generic. Standard Pearson adapted for retail applications with seasonal adjustment factors. Can you explain how Bayesian approaches reduce margin of error? In predictive modeling. Aurora's response was textbook gibberish. Technically accurate words in sequences that meant nothing. Can you walk us through the difference between modified Pearson correlation and the proprietary segmentation framework Hannah actually used? Aurora couldn't. She literally could not explain it. I'd need to review the files to speak to those specific technical details. Sienna's smile was sharp. You claim to have authored those technical details. You billed Hartley Manufacturing for 68 hours of analytical development, but you need to review Hannah's work to explain it. Silence. No further questions. Maria Santos spoke next. I want to read from an email Aurora sent me in December. Maria, your market penetration analysis shows promise but lacks strategic depth. I've refined the methodology and will be presenting to the client next week. She looked up. That technical contribution was 4 months of work. Aurora accessed my files 2 days before the client meeting and presented my work as her strategic vision. When I objected, she wrote me up for insubordination. Kyle Brennan corroborated the pattern from Redstone Consulting. David Park developed a risk assessment model that won the Financial Times Innovation Award. Aurora accepted that award. When David complained, they buried it and pushed him out with a confidentiality agreement. Jenna connected her laptop to the display. I pulled billing data for every project Aurora supervised. There's a consistent pattern of hour inflation. Hannah worked 298 hours on Thompson Hardy. The client was billed for 340 hours. The additional 42 hours were attributed to Aurora at her director-level rate, $27,300 for work. The file logs prove Aurora never performed. The numbers kept coming. Across all projects, clients were overbilled $215,000 for work attributed to Aurora that she demonstrably didn't perform. This isn't just intellectual property theft. Patricia said, this is client fraud, wire fraud potentially. We're looking at federal charges. The board voted 30 minutes later, unanimous. Aurora Winters was terminated for cause effective immediately. 6 months later, I sat in my office at Meridian Group overlooking the Chicago River. 4 analysts reported to me now. My name was on every report, every presentation, every client meeting. David Park and I were collaborating on a hybrid project integrating risk frameworks with consumer insights. The work was some of the best either of us had ever produced. I looked out at Chicago glittering in the twilight, the city where I'd been humiliated 6 months ago. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so undeniably excellent that when the moment of truth arrives, justice delivers itself. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's justice wrapped in grace. Silent revenge.